Hello, we are back, ready to do another day of our book club, Be Holy for I Am Holy book club. And we are reading the beautiful visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich. She was beatified
Yeah,
beatified. I could never say that. Beatified in 2004 by Pope John Paul II. So her her stories have been verified and okayed by the church.
they've been gone through with a fine-tooth
Uh,
comb, and they are not doctrinally incorrect, and they are historically correct.
yes. So we are getting to the baptism, guys. Jesus is walking, picking up people,
Sowing
talking to
seeds,
people,
sowing seeds.
healing some people, but then he stopped now because he was getting too close to the baptism, so he's gonna let the waters do the healing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So so today's Jesus interview with Silent Mary. You were waiting for this one, Hen.
And his conversations with his mother.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I
So
hope it's good.
mhm. Accompanied by Lazarus, Jesus went also to the abode of the women. And Martha took him to her silent sister Mary, with whom he wished to speak. A wall separated the large courtyard from a smaller one, which latter, however, was still quite spacious. In it was an enclosed garden adjoining Mary's dwelling. They passed through a gate, and Jesus remained in a little garden while Martha went to call her silent sister. The garden was highly ornamental. In the center stood a large date tree, and all around were aromatic herbs and shrubs. On one side was a fountain, or rather a kind of tiny lake, with a stone seat in the center. From the opposite edge to the sea was laid a plank upon which Silent Mary could cross and there sit under an awning and surrounded by the water. Martha went to her and bade her come down into the garden, for there someone was waiting to speak to her. Silent Mary was very obedient. Without a word, she threw her veil around her and followed her sister into the garden. Then then Martha retired. Mary was tall and very beautiful. She was about 30 years old. She generally kept her eyes fixed on heaven. If occasionally she glanced to one side where Jesus was, it was only a glance, a side glance, and vaguely, as if she were gazing into the distance. Even when speaking of herself, she never used the pronoun, but always as if she saw herself as a second person and spoke accordingly. She did not address Jesus nor cast herself at his feet. Jesus was the first to salute, and they walked together around the garden. Properly speaking, they did not converse together. Silent Mary kept herself fixed on high and recounted heavenly things as if passing before her eyes. Jesus spoke in the same manner of his Father and to his Father. Mary never looked at Jesus, though while speaking, she sometimes half turned to the side upon which he was talking. There was more there was more a prayer, a song, a praise, a contemplation, a revealing of mysterious than conversation. Mary appeared as if ignorant of her own existence. Her soul was in another world while her body lived on earth. 10.
The moment.
Yes, I'll read another sentence. Of their speech during that interview, I can remember that glancing intuitively upon the incarnation of Christ, they spoke as of gazing upon the most holy Trinity, acting in that mystery. Their simple and yet profoundly significant words I cannot recall. Mary, gazing upon it, said, "The Father commissioned the Son to go down to mankind, among whom a virgin should conceive him." Then she described the rejoicing of the angels and how Gabriel was sent to the Virgin. And so she ran through the 9 angelic choirs, who all came down with the bearer of the glad tidings, just as a child would joyously describe a procession moving before its eyes, praising the devotion and zeal of all that composed it. 10.
Then she seemed to glance into the chamber of the Virgin, to whom she spoke words expressive of her hope that she might receive the angel's message. She saw the angel arrive and announce the coming of the Savior. She saw all and repeated all as if uttering her thoughts aloud, gazing the while into the distance. Suddenly, she paused, her eyes fixed on the Virgin, who appeared to be recollecting herself before replying to the angel, and said very simply, "Then thou hast made a vow of virginity? Ah, if thou hast refused to be the Lord's mother, what would have happened? Would there have been found another virgin?" Then, addressing her nation, she exclaimed, "Had the Virgin refused long whilst thou, O orphaned Israel, still have groaned." And now, filled with joy by the Virgin's consent, she burst forth into words of praise and thanksgiving, rehearsed the wonders of Jesus's birth, and addressed the divine child, said, "Butter and honey shalt thou eat." She again repeated the prophecies, recalled those of Simeon and Anna, spoke with the different personages connected with them, and all this as if gazing upon those scenes contemporary with them. At last, descending to the present, she said, speaking as if alone, "Now goest thou on the painful, bitter way," etc. Although she knew that the Lord was at her side, yet she acted and spoke as if he were no nearer to her than all the other visions just recounted. Jesus interrupted her from time to time with prayer and thanksgiving, praising his Father and interceding for mankind. The whole interview was inexpressibly touching and wonderful. Jesus left her, relapsing into her usual silence and exterior apathy. She returned to her house. When Jesus went back to Lazarus and Martha, he said to them something like the following: "She is not without understanding, but her soul is not of this world. She sees not this world, and this world comprehends her not. She is happy. She knows no sin." Like Mary. Silent Mary, in her altogether spiritual state of contemplation, was really and truly oblivious to all that happened to her or around her. She was always thus abstracted. She had never before spoken in the presence of others as she had just done in that of Jesus. Before all others, she kept silence, though not from pride or reserve. No, it was because she saw not those people interiorly, saw not what they saw, but gazed upon redemption and the things of heaven alone. When at times accosted by a learned and pious friend of the family, she would indeed utter some words audibly, though without understanding a single word of what had been said to her. not having reference to or connection with the vision upon which she was interiorly gazing at the time. She heard without hearing. Consequently, her reply, bearing upon what was then engrossing her own attention, mystified her hearers. It was for this reason that she was regarded by the family as a simpleton. Her state necessitated her dwelling alone, for her soul lived not in time. She cultivated her little garden and embroidered for the temple. Martha brought her work. She was skillful with the needle, which she piled in uninterrupted musing and meditation. She prayed most piously and devoutly and endured a kind of expiatory suffering of the sins of others. For her soul was often oppressed as if the weight of the whole world was upon her. Her dwelling was comfortably fitted up with sofas and different kinds of furniture. She ate little and always alone. She died of grief at the immensity of Jesus's passion, which in spirit she foresaw. Martha spoke to Jesus of Magdalene and her own great anxiety on her account. Jesus comforted her, telling her that Magdalene would certainly be converted, but that she must on no account weary of praying for her and exhorting her to change her life. At about 1:30, the Blessed Virgin arrived with Mary Chusa, Leah, Mary Salome, and Mary Cleopas. The servant had in advance announced their approach. Martha, Seraphia, Mary Marcus, and Susanna proceeded to that hall at the entrance of the castle where Jesus the day before had been received by Lazarus. They took with them refreshments and the vessels necessary for washing their guests' feet. After welcoming the newly arrived and performing for them that duty of hospitality, the latter changed their dress, lowered their skirts, and put on fresh veils. All were clothed in undyed wool, yellowish, white, or brownish. They partook of a light refreshment and then accompanied Martha to her house. Jesus and the men now presented themselves to salute the holy women, after which Jesus retired for an interview with the Blessed Virgin. He told her most earnestly and lovingly that he was about to begin his career, that he was now going to John's baptism, whence he would return and once more be with her for a short time in the region of Samaria. But then he would retire to the desert for 40 days. When Mary heard him speak of the desert, she became very uneasy. She besought him not to go so frightful a place where he would die of hunger and thirst. Jesus replied that henceforth she should not seek to deter him by human considerations, for he must accomplish what was marked out for him. A very different life was now about to commence for him, and they who would adhere to him must suffer with him, that he must now fulfill his mission, and she must sacrifice all purely personal claims upon him. He added that although he would love her as ever yet, he was now for all mankind. She should do as he said, and his heavenly Father would reward her for what Simeon had foretold was about to be fulfilled. A sword should pierce her soul. The Blessed Virgin listened bravely. She was very much troubled. though at the same time strong in her resignation to God, for Jesus was very tender and loving. That evening, Lazarus gave a feast to which Simon the Pharisee and some others of the sect were invited. The women ate in an adjacent room, which was separated by a grating from the men's dining hall, but within hearing of all that Jesus said. He taught of faith, hope, charity, and obedience. He said they who desired to follow him must not look back. They should practice what he taught and suffer the trials that might befall them. For that he would never abandon them. He again alluded to the thorny path before him, to the buffetings and persecutions he would have to undergo, and impressed upon them the fact that whoever called themselves his friends would have to suffer with him. His hearers, deeply touched, listened in wonder to his words, but what he said in allusion to his bitter passion, they did not rightly understand. They did not take his words in their simple and literal meaning, but looked upon them as the figurative expressions of prophecy. The Pharisees present, though less favorably disposed than the others, found nothing to carp at in Jesus's speech. This time, however, he spoke very moderately. So the next one is Jesus journeys with Nazareth to the place of baptism for what is that, Monday. So that'll be Monday. So let's go back to the beginning. And Jeanette, I want you to speak because I got the map yesterday and I want to go grab it real quick to show it to you. That map book that I told you about. So talk a little
Yeah.
bit about your impressions of our reading this morning, just while I go and grab the book.
Okay. I was wanting to really hear about Silent Mary, and I was a little disappointed she didn't speak much, but I guess she spoke enough. And she was kind of like very shy with Jesus. She wouldn't look at him.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder how we would react knowing that Jesus is who he is. Because the people that he was
Yes, she
going
knew.
to, oh, of course, but the
I didn't
people
think
that
she
he
knew
would,
before.
the people that he would go to, didn't really know who he was, and he would kind of talk about the Messiah coming. He wouldn't really say that he was him because he knew that they couldn't take it. They couldn't understand
Well,
it.
I think he didn't want to
But
reveal it yet because he didn't want to be persecuted yet because he had a lot to do first. That's what I
exactly.
think.
But
Yeah.
she was so interiorly
Intuitive.
in the heavens already.
Yes.
She knew everything so well. She told them everything that
Yes.
happened so perfectly that she knew who he was probably right away the instant he showed up. So that's why her gaze was like she was feeling unworthy, you know.
Yeah.
Gosh, how would we feel? We'd be on the
And she
floor,
was
you know.
she looked of the side eye. She didn't, but you know, women were different back then. But it says she kind of looked the side eye. She didn't look like you know, right in his face like we do. We have an arrogance today. We look straight in people's faces, but we've also been taught that by our world today.
Yeah, we're
So,
taught that we have to look a person in the eye when speaking to them. We can't look away because that's
right.
offensive. That's like we're,
So it is a cultural difference a bit,
yeah.
but she mentions it here. And remember, she's from the 1800s. So she does mention it. But you know, I was disappointed too, not about Silent Mary, because at least they told a lot about her, but the Virgin. The only thing we hear is she was told and she felt very sad and very grave, and of course, you know, we knew that, but I didn't know, we didn't know the moment, but here's the moment he's telling her. And you know, it was kind of like I'm glad, because I always wondered. First of all, it does tell us about the baptism. She wasn't at the baptism. And that's why I wanted to show you this book. It's so, I want to bring it, I'm going to bring it today, because we're going to sew today. So um but I was like, oh, okay, well, let me look for what was it, Samaria, but I figured I'll wait till we get there. So let's go through it a little bit. So here, accompanied by Lazarus, Jesus went to the woman, and Martha took him to her silent sister Mary, whom he wished to speak. And I did wonder, well, why is this such a big deal about Silent Mary? I don't know, but I think because she's so
She was kind of
holy.
like a prophetess. She was kind of like a
Yeah,
prophet.
like
So
she's
she
so
knew.
holy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it only makes sense because when people are so holy, we're kind of in awe of them, you know? So I think that's why, I mean, that's the only thing I could think, like, why are they making such a big deal? But I think they're also showing Silent Mary is very similar to Mary, the Virgin Mary. I think they're trying to show how similar they are. They're both silent, they're both very in tune, and they both know where other people don't seem to know, as you said. So that kind of, jumped out for me. So the and so with Mary, whom he wished to speak, he wanted to talk to the silent Mary. And I wonder, like, well, why did he want to speak to her? I don't know. So the wall separated. I like the way they describe these large courtyards. Like, I would always, when I was younger, I would always think, oh, I want to build a house, and I want there to be a courtyard. And then I learned from some feng shui or something that made the middle empty, and that wasn't good. Now I realize that's wrong, and the courtyards actually are the way families live. So I find that fascinating. So I love to hear about these courtyards that they talk about. And I love to hear about these little gardens, because my grandmother had a garden, and just like when I come to your house, it's like I'm coming to my grandmom's because of all the growing and all. She didn't grow food so much. She grew tomatoes, but mostly she had flowers, which were just beautiful. But she did grow some little things, but I don't remember what they were. But I just remember the tomato because I have a picture of her holding one of her huge tomatoes. And she had ducks and stuff. So when I hear of gardens, I think of that. I never think of animals though. So I like to hear about the gardens. So, and there were a large date tree and aromatic herbs and shrubs. So like if you put yourself there, you could smell these herbs and and see these shrubs. And it's not like square shrubs like we have today. They were natural and beautiful, and they smell strong and beautiful because there's no like, it was nice that we learned about plants and all from that priest who taught us about genes. I forget his name, but in many ways they've done so much experimental that they've watered down some of our foods today, because they added things and they wanted to keep bugs away, so they added things. And it's just, back then the smells were strong and odorous. So, and then then she talks about this fountain that had a little stone seat in the center. And I think of our fountains today. I can almost image this. And this is what I love about her writings. You could put yourself there, you could smell things, you can visualize these things. Like, it just is so beautiful. And then she talks about how she sat on the seat really close to the water. Like, I was imagining her dipping her feet in the water, because she's saying this plank sat across right at the end of the fountain. So I was imagining her feet kind of dangling in. And she could cross there and sit under an awning surrounded by the water. So I just thought that was beautiful. And Martha calls her down, and telling her, I have someone to speak with you. And so I because of the Mary and Martha story, that Mary doesn't do what Martha wants her to do, but now it makes more sense of why, because she's usually obedient. But in that case in the Bible, he says, Mary is doing what you should do, be at my feet and in prayer. But he's not saying that you should be doing that. She's trying to get him to help her with all the cleaning and serving everyone. And she's so offended that she's just sitting there and she's doing all the serving. But Jesus is like, no, that's your role and this is her role. So, just like women have a role and men have a role. And instead of trying to change our genders and all these weird things, we just accept our roles. But in this case, Mary was very obedient. She doesn't argue because it is the time. She knows when is the time. And Jesus is kind of saying, accept her. She's not a simpleton. She is wise. This is what this is telling us. There are many people in this world, we think, especially today, if we're not verbose and telling everything and this and that they're dumb, the people that are silent. But like my daughter does not say much. She's always very quiet. And she doesn't like that about herself. And I said, when I was your age, I was very quiet too, Elizabeth. I mean, I was a big mouth on one hand, like you can be. I said, but I'm very quiet. I was very quiet because I didn't have as much to say or whatever. But my daughter's very intuitive. She is a Pisces. Sorry to bring up astrology, but I look at personality. But anyway, so there she is. She leaves. I noticed too that she leaves her with Jesus. She followed her sister to the garden and presents him to Jesus. Then Martha retires. So she leaves them alone. She doesn't sit there like watching. So, today we would be like, oh, I want to hear what they say. We have a very nosy part of us today. I'd be like, oh, I want to hear what they're going to talk about, But Martha goes on and she retires to her place. And also, I find this interesting. Mary is tall and very beautiful. I imagined her small and quiet and, with withdrawn and all. So I imagined her small as a person. But so it's interesting to find out she was not small. She was very tall. And she was about 30. Like I was imagining her older. But here she's, back then that's not considered young, but to us now, 30 years old is young, She kept her eyes fixed on heaven. So I was so surprised when they said that she never used the pronoun. She never said I. You know how they say today, be like, how many I's did you say in that sentence? I, because we're very obsessed with ourselves, And so I found it interesting that a woman writing from the 1800s about 2000 years ago, well, back then this would have been 1800 years ago, is talking about pronouns. And what do we talk about today? Our pronouns, they and them, and all the silliness that we're going through. And it's a way of taking God out, apparently. But here, she actually uses the words pronoun. Now, of course, was Catherine Emmerich, what was it, French or Italian? What was it? Or
I don't think she was French. I think she was from Rome. Wasn't she from
is it
Rome?
Italy, Italian?
I think so.
Okay. So I found it interesting that Emmerich uses the word pronoun here, and it's transcribed that way. But she also saw herself in a second person and spoke accordingly. So she almost talked about herself like they're like almost like that third, when people say, oh, she spoke in third person, she's speaking as a second person of herself. So that's a little confusing there. She did not address Jesus or cast herself at her feet, where we hear about her in the Bible. And I think that's why she's mentioning it like that. And Jesus was the first to say, "Good morning, Mary," or whatever it was he said. And they walked around the garden. See, what you were disappointed about, as was I, we didn't hear any actual words. We're just hearing a description. And it
Yeah.
was kind of disappointing because we're like,
Yeah. I
oh,
wanted to hear a
interview.
conversation with
Yeah.
her.
We're like, oh, interview. We got all excited. That's why I said at the beginning, let's see if it's as exciting as we thought. But it's still exciting because we do learn about her being tall and beautiful and 30 and how she behaves and how she's different from in the Bible. So we do hear a description, because remember, her visions are that visions. She doesn't always hear as much as she sees. So, and she interprets it for us. Um, so I thought that interesting, um, and that she spoke and saw herself as a second person. Like, that's a little bit, weird to me, the way she describes that. So, properly speaking, they did not converse together. So she's seeing all this and they're not talking, but she says here they were not talking because silent Mary kept her gaze. Everything is recounted in heavenly. See, this is the way she reminds me a lot of my mom. My mom, and a part of it is my mom was extraordinarily observant, and she didn't say much. She would be watching you. And she would sort of make you feel uncomfortable because in one hand, you'd see her, she'd be in the kitchen, she'd be cooking stuff, but you would know she was observing you. My mother was really weird like that. And people always underestimated her, just like they call Mary the simpleton because she's quiet. No, wise people are often quiet and observant, which my mother was very wise. And because my mother was poor, she was very underestimated. And she was sometimes looked at not as a simpleton. Everyone knew my mother was intelligent, but she didn't always say. And that's kind of the feeling I'm getting around Silent Mary. She doesn't, she doesn't like, my mom would get offended if people thought she was a simpleton, but Mary does not get offended. She's so humble. She doesn't seem to notice that people think she's a simpleton, which is good, you know? So Jesus spoke in a same manner as his father and to his father. So their interaction was more intuitive, and they sort of are, face to face, and she doesn't even look at him, but yet they're in each other's presence. And I hate to sound new agey here, but they're sort of reading each other's field because, even though we're not supposed to like look at the new age, like reading auras and things like that, there is a life, a life center, just like when the human uh egg is conceived, there's a spark of light. There is an aura around us as humans. We don't have the technology, although there are people that do show technology, but I don't know if it's more on heat. But there are like little instruments that they can show different colors of auras, and they pretend to know what it means. And that's why that kind of stuff is dangerous, that new age. But that's kind of like the feeling I get. They are like walking around each other in each other's presence. And when you go to the other side, if you listen to a lot of near-death experiences, they talk about how you don't speak in words, but you pick up what the other is thinking and saying to you. Like, you ask a direct question and they answer you, but it's not with words. So that's kind of the feeling, the near-death feeling that I'm feeling, and reading each other's field energy field around in each other's aura. That's why Mary knows, because that's how my mother was. My mother was, and I hate to use the word psychic, but my mother would know things, not just because she observed, but because she intuitively
Well,
knew.
she had like visions then. It's not really psychic. It's more like,
No, it is
God's
psychic.
allowing her to see things. Like, because she had faith, God was allowing her to see things. He allowed these people to see things. He allowed the prophets to see things in their dreams, and also, physically see things. Look at Anne Catherine Emmerich, visions, mystics, but not really psychic saying, but more like,
It is psychic, though. It's just
but
that
it's
psychic has been given a bad word. Psychic has become a bad word because of the New Age. Just like they stole the rainbow, these certain people, with their pridefulness, they steal the rainbow. Well, it's sort of like psychics have done that. Intuition is a normal part of humanity, and our intuition is so much more powerful than we realize if we tap into it, but not in the New Age sense. We have to be very clear. God does not want us. He wants us to be given the grace that he gives us, which he gives Mary this gift, this sort of mystical ability to, as you say, see visions. But it's not really that. It's really a knowingness that we all know, and that we, because of our humanity, we there, if you listen to a lot of near-death experiences, they tell you that they gain a lot of abilities, some of them mathematics, some of them, all of them psychic type stuff, but they have to learn to tune it out, because they cannot operate in this world, because this world has different properties than the world on the other side. So they have to learn to quiet it. So we learn as children, we are told, listen to your elders, follow what you're told to do. And we are almost taught to squash our intuition when we're young, where someone like her, they didn't tell her to squash herself. They just said, oh, she's just nuts. She's a simpleton. So this gives her the chance, and she's humble, so she doesn't care about them thinking she's wise, but it gives her the excuse to be quiet, where we're not given that. We're told we are to listen, but she gets to experience what it's like to be a true mystic and not have to answer for her behavior, because she doesn't care to. She's not building her ego. In our 20s, we're supposed to build our egos and our pride up to some degree with our vocations and our families and things like that. We build up our pride to operate in this world. We need a little bit of that. But then, after, I tell my kids, after our certain ages, we have to break down our pride and be humble. But there's a fine thing. You can have humility when you're young, because I've met a lot of humble young people that are highly educated, that are doctor. You could meet 20 doctors in their 20s, and they could be very humble and not prideful. So it exists. It's just that typically we build up our pride in our 20s. But anyway, so let's go on. So Mary appeared as if ignorant of her own existence, but her soul was in another world while her body lived on earth, and she could operate, probably because she had family. She didn't have to go out and make a vocation. She just sat and did her embroidery for the temple, and Martha would bring her work, because they thought she was a simpleton, but she wasn't. So there's of their speech, she can remember. So they did speak a tiny bit, glancing intuitively. The word intuitively is like, intuitive and psychic are on a similar vein, only psychic is more a knowingness. Intuitively is knowingness, but it's not quite as a parent, it's more like a feeling kind of. That's what we get, a feeling. So intuitively, upon the incarnation of Christ, she knew he was God. They spoke as if gazing upon the most holy Trinity, acting in that mystery. Their simple yet profoundly significant words cannot recall. So they're using simple words, but they both know that they know. Christ knows that she knows, she knows. So Mary is gazing upon the Father commissioned the Son. She knew this. She knew that the Son was sent down to mankind among a virgin and should conceive him. So when you think about it, they're trying to show Mary and Mary as similar. And since she knows this, is she modeling herself after Mary? You know, the Protestants don't understand the fascination we have with Mary, but it is this right here. We are supposed to model ourselves and trust God without knowing fully. We are to have faith without full knowledge, because humanity, we couldn't have that full knowledge, because then we wouldn't have a test. We're here on a test. You don't get the answers on a test. So it's sort of like we're being told to model her, and we see here Mary actually modeling her, and we see here Mary knows that. So does she consciously model Mary silently? Because she's watching Mary be silent. We don't hear much about Mary in here, but we are being told a lot about silent Mary, and that Mary knows. So I believe now, I never knew that Mary was, that this Mary, the silent Mary, knew, Lazarus' sister, knew who Jesus was. I never knew that. So we learned something huge in this reading, knowing that she knew. And does that mean she modeled herself after Mary? And I would say 100% yes. She is modeling herself after Mary. She is intuitive herself, but I think she's modeling. I think she intuitively knew since she was young. She's 30. Now remember, Jesus right now is 33. So that means Mary is about 45, because Mary had Jesus at about 15. So Mary is about 15 years older than silent Mary. So that means, you know, they were very good friends. So that means she was born when Mary was a 15-year-old. And you can only imagine that Mary held silent Mary as a baby. You could imagine that, because a 15-year-old, you know, if she's growing up with her as a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, back then those children helped with children. So I would imagine that they were very close with the Holy Family. They grew up together. She knew her as a baby and she held her. So silent Mary was in Mother Mary's presence, being a very intuitive person. She would have been picking up Mary's energy field and knowing she's the mother, she's going to be the mother of God. Like she had her own almost visions, but didn't say it. She didn't have a spiritual director that said, write down your visions like we have Emmerich doing. She, you know, so that means Mary held little silent Mary as a baby. And I find that fascinating. She doesn't express that, but we must infer that they were very close, you know. And you have to think, they're telling us here she's 30 years old, this Mary, and we know that Jesus is 30 years old, right? So they're born around the same time. So we know that as young Mary was raising Jesus, she was also picking up little Mary. And you know, people don't just pick up their kids, they pick up other people's children. Back then it requires a village to raise children. So Jesus and her grew up together. They know each other, you know, it seems. Well, because we're told that Lazarus, they're family friends and they're very close. So here Mary knows this, and then she describes the rejoicing of the angels. So she's talking about the angels with Jesus. and how Gabriel was sent to the virgin. She's telling Jesus, I know this. So we don't hear a lot about what she says, but look what we do hear, Jeanette. She's describing the rejoicing of the angels and how
Yeah.
she's telling Jesus, before you were born, Jesus, did you know before you were born that the angels rejoiced about you being born? I mean, we may not be hearing actual words, but we're hearing that she described the rejoicing of the angels. So yes, it's disappointing. Like we want this long interview with like lots of information,
Yeah.
but look at the little bit we hear. Like it's so poignant. It's the rejoicing of the angels and how Gabriel was sent to the Virgin.
And this is
Mary
big
was
because
considered
she,
a simpleton. Yeah, she's considered
yeah.
dumb. And she's telling him this great mystery. Go ahead. What were you saying? This is big.
No, this is big because I mean, she was able to see this.
And she's
And I
considered
mean,
dumb. She's considered a
yeah,
simpleton.
that's,
It's
and
huge.
we tend to be guilty of that here also. If we don't
Yes.
hear somebody start talking and we start judging them without really
Yes.
knowing them. And that's
Yes.
one of the biggest reasons why we got to leave it to God,
Yes.
because
Everybody's different.
we can't see people's hearts the way
That's
that
right.
God does. We can't see what's going to happen to them in their lives. God sees that instantly. He sees a person and he knows what happened, what's going to happen, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what they're thinking, what they did. It's amazing. And so there's no way that we
And you,
could ever.
yeah.
Isaiah 55:8-9, that's, I go back to that.
And when you think about it, the Bible says that to have fewer words. And the Bible says that those people rushing around with all the big mouths and they're doing everything like Martha and all, they are not the smart ones. The Pharisees and the Sadducees out there telling everyone everything, they aren't always the most wise. The ones who are quiet and observant are intuitive. And I hate to bring up astrology, but if you notice water signs, Scorpio, which I don't like because they're mean, usually, um, Pisces and Cancers. My mother was a Cancer. My daughter's a Pisces. My younger son is a Cancer. And my son and my younger son and my daughter are always quiet. He will not let one word that he says go on Facebook. I'm not allowed to say what he says. And even pictures. He is and my son does not like stare at you in the eye. He listens intuitively. And my mother was a Cancer. He's a lot like my mother. Some ways my daughter is like my mother. So I really have a sense that Mary here is a water sign. I hate to say, but I go by personality, and we're getting to see her personality. And I guarantee you she's one of those three. She can't be a Scorpio because they're mean.
I don't know too much about that stuff.
What are you? You are an Aquarius. What are you, an Aquarius or?
I'm Libra.
Oh, a Libra. Yeah, you're same as my son. That's right. You and my son are born a day apart. And me and your husband are born a day apart. It's so funny. Your husband's 26 and you're 26. I'm 27 and my son is 27. So it's funny. It's weird, guys, how our birthdays with Jeanette and I. And me and my son don't always get along. Me and Libras, Aries and Libras. Here you're married to an Aries. So I find that fascinating. So anyway, like you just said, we don't respect that, and we have to learn to not be thinking because someone's personality is different than ours that they're in the wrong. They're just different, and accept what is instead of. I'm listening to a book right now, you guys. Oh my gosh, it's so good. I saw an article on one of the Catholic Facebook groups, and they mentioned that the counselor the counselors that graduate from Divine Mercy University, if you're ever getting counseling for your family, make sure they graduated from the Divine Mercy University in Virginia. I was telling my kids that yesterday, or my grandson and my daughter, that if you ever go to a counselor, make sure they graduated from there, because this doctor, I think anyway, the book is called Mindful Catholic, and they talk about being in the moment, and the author is Gregory Battaro, I think. Unfortunately, Audible covers this, but if you look up this guy, I was like, oh, because this Catholic thing said this is the place where, if you're going to get counseling, go to this place. And this guy that runs it is named Dr. Gregory Battaro, Bottaro. Look below. And then he says, and the place to get a therapist, and make sure that they're trained. He says, I believe the best training is at the Divine Mercy University in Virginia. So this Mindful Catholic talks about tapping into our is quieting our minds. Remember, Jeanette? Jeanette and I are doing a program on angel, and we're talking about how hard it is. Like, if you do the sacred story and we're told to spend 15 minutes quiet time. We're also told to pray. And a lot of people that are like us, we have a hard time praying because we have a hard time being quiet. I happen to like a lot of time alone. So I have a lot of silent time, but I still found it difficult to pray. So for the last 3 years, Jeanette and I have, we did the rosary for those almost 2 years. And I have been working on prayer. And I know Jeanette, she does such good prayer, and I would be like, oh, Jeanette, make a prayer because look at this happen. I need a prayer. So I would ask Jeanette, because she does such beautiful prayers. And so I would ask her, and I would look up all these Catholic prayers and I would recite them and say them. And the rosary, when Jeanette and I would do it, there would be a rhythm. People always say, oh, you're not supposed to repetition. Catholics always do repetition. But what happens in repetition is your mind goes into sort of not a trance, but you pick things up. And this book, The Mindful Catholic, talks about silencing our monkey minds. And he has I think 8 to 10 different exercises. So this psychologist wrote this book, and one of my favorite authors, Jeanette, Peter Kreeft, Kreeft, he does the foreword to this. I'm going to post it today. I did start taping it yesterday, but my daughter called right before it ended, and I'm like, hello. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm taping something. She goes, I'm sorry, I'll hang up. I said, nope, it's too late. You already interrupted it. I had already almost did a whole hour of taping. So I'm going to tape that for you guys today. And upload it. Oh my gosh, you got to listen to Peter Kreeft's thing. Guess what, Jeanette? Peter Kreeft had ADHD.
Wow.
He talks about it. And in the Mindful Catholic, it's for people like us. It's like getting therapy through a book. He gives you 8, and he also gives it free, guys. So I'm going to put it up. You have to listen to it. So anyway, so that's what we're talking about here, is tapping into our intuition and using Mother Mary as a role model, Silent Mary as a role model. And this book, believe it or not, we're talking about it in our angel meeting. And then boom, this book comes to me. And here we're in the reading. It's like God arranges our lessons, our soul lessons, Jeanette. And you and I were meant to go on a lesson together. And I love that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so she tells him about the angels. It is a little disappointing we don't get more, but that's huge. So Then she runs through 9 angelic choirs. We hear about these in the Bible. We're not supposed to name our angels because we don't have authority over them. But here she's going through and telling. Now, does she read the Bible? No, we don't, the that's not written yet. There's no, the Revelations, where is it, the 9 choirs? Is that in Revelation, Jeanette, or act where? That's in Revelation,
I
right?
think so, yeah.
It
Revelation.
makes sense, right? So she she's talking about that, and yeah, we don't hear a lot of words, but what we do hear is like a, she's, if you notice about silent people, they say little, but what they say has a huge punch. It's like, wow, she's talking about the angels before Revelations is even written. Revelation, it's not Revelations, which I always say. But anyway, and I think it was Taylor Marshall that said it's Revelation, that he taught me that. Anyway, so just as a child would joyously describe a procession moving before its eyes, so just like Jeanette said, she actually has visions, and she's praising the devotion and zeal of all that is composed. She's like describing what John sees, since he's the one we say wrote Revelation. She's like describing what John saw. It's like, wow, before John is ever born. So
Yeah.
well, wait a minute. No, what am I saying? John is born. He's John is born. What am I saying? He's a disciple of Jesus. So she's describing what John sees. So not only do some of the disciples get shown these things, but so John is a mystic, but also she sees these things. So she glances at the chamber of the Virgin, who I believe she's modeling, and whom she spoke words expressive of her hope that she might receive the angel's message. So Jeanette, what is this saying? I'm not sure. This is saying, then she seemed to glance into the chamber of the Virgin, so where Mary sleeps, and to whom she spoke words expressive of her hope that she might receive the angel's message. Whose hope? I don't understand this.
Well, Mary prayed all the time in her chamber. She was always praying. So
True.
this could be a glimpse of her praying after she saw the angel and heard his message, trying to understand it better. You know how we sometimes something happens in our lives and we're like, oh wow, that's answered prayer, but then later on we ponder and we think
So she's
about
picking up Mary intuitively, because she can
Mary's
see her
prayer that she prayed.
picking that up. Good
hearing her
point.
prayer,
I
which
see.
is
Yes,
what Anne
I think you're
Catherine
right.
Emmerich is doing now. She's listening and watching Jesus and Silent Mary interact and what they're doing. So she was very much like Anne Catherine Emmerich, Silent Mary. She saw things and she could put herself in a person's body kind of and feel what she was doing. She was praying and she was reaching out,
So
trying
she
to
was
understand the
modeling Mary.
angel. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was modeling Mary. And because Mary talked to the angels, she had a hope of talking to him. Okay, now I get it. You're right. I think you're 100% right. She saw the angel arrive and announce the coming of the Savior. So I guess what they're saying here is Silent Mary saw what Mary went through, just like Catherine Emmerich saw. I think you're right. She saw all and repeated all as if uttering her thoughts aloud. So she's telling Jesus she knows this. So yeah, it's disappointing, but it's also, she says a lot, because we want a whole conversation. We don't get a whole conversation, but those silent people know how to make what they say pack a punch. So suddenly she pauses, her eyes fixed on the Virgin, who appeared to be recollecting. So I guess they're sitting there talking, and all of a sudden Mary comes into the conversation, and she appeared to be recollecting herself before replying to the angel. Oh, wait a minute. No, she's talking about Mary with the angel. Oh, no. Okay, so she's describing that what happened. She said, then thou hast made a vow of virginity. So she's saying, but how can I do that? I want to be a virgin, she's telling the angel. So she's telling us she's seeing this. And then I don't understand this, Jeanette. Tell me what you think. Ah, if thou hast refused to be the Lord's mother, what would have happened? Would there have been found another virgin? Like, what is making her say that? I don't, it's kind of
Well,
odd.
she's thinking on what would have happened if she would have said no.
Is she
If Mary
thinking
would have said
maybe
no.
she's thinking, what is so special about Mary? Maybe that's what she's thinking here.
Yeah, she's just
What
trying
is
to
so special?
analyze. She's just trying to analyze Mary and how she instantly said yes. And
You're right.
the only thing she was questioning was how was this going to happen because she knew how a child is conceived. The angel part she took for granted. She just expected the angels to be around her. She was raised by the angels when she was in the temple. The angels were always around her. They were always with her. Her guardian angel
Like
and
that.
her had a very close relationship together.
Yes.
So when she saw the angel in the chamber, she wasn't like, whoa, an angel, what the heck is going on? No, she was okay, I'm here. Do unto me according to thy will. But then when the angel said what was going to happen, she's like, how's that possible?
Yeah.
I don't know man.
Right.
How can that happen? Then the angel explained it.
That the Holy Spirit
Yeah.
would overshadow her. But you're right. I think now I get it. Now I get it, because even though I think what she's doing is she's questioning why Mary was chosen. Would it have been the same? But she she is she exclaims, had the virgin refused, long would thou, O orphan Israel, still have grown. She's saying, you know, Israel, remember, the Jews don't accept Christ as the Messiah today. You hear about these Jews today, they think the Messiah still hasn't come. So they're talking about the Jews groaning. Whenever my daughter groans about something and complains, I said, embrace your Scottish roots. We're tough. Don't, because Jewish people are very sensitive people. And so it's like, they complain if things aren't perfect, and so I think it's interesting she's saying that Mary was what it had to be Mary. I think that's what she's saying here. It couldn't have just been another virgin.
No.
When Protestants say, oh, she was just a virgin, Mary seems to be saying here, no, Israel would have, no, it had to be this Mary.
From Anne's conception, Mary's mother, God knew what he was doing. He knew where Mary was going to come from. He prepared the whole Assyrian, she was born from a very holy Assyrian tribe. It was all prepared, and they knew.
Yes.
Even Anne knew what was happening. Anne
They
also
knew
probably
from the
had
stories.
angels.
They
Yeah.
also knew from the stories. Remember, they
Yeah.
had the Old Testament. So they knew a child was to be born from the David. And even though it was hidden, it had to be hidden. And even though Joseph was supposed to be the king, and Herod and all them, they usurped, just like look what happened with Biden. They stole the election. We know they did. So, that happens in powerful things. So here, filled with the joy of the virgin's consent, what happens? She bursts forth into words of praise. She's like, be it done unto me, butter and honey thou shalt eat. So it's like Mary is sort of saying her vision and intuiting being Mary, she's saying, or not being her, but watching it, saying, butter and honey thou shalt eat. And then she repeats prophecies and recalls those of Simeon and Anna, and spoke of the different personages connected with them. Remember, we learned their connection. They're not married, as Jeanette said the other day, but and Simeon has his own family, but she's telling the scenes of when Jesus was born, and Mary takes her to the temple that we see in the mystery of the temple, the presentation. So she's telling them, she's talking about the sword, and now goest thou on a painful, bitter way. Even though she talks about the joy, now she goes into this, just like Mary is so excited she just had a baby. And at the presentation, Jeanette did the rosary, you guys, so you have to listen to her rosary. We're still trying to get the rest of it up, and we should today. Jeanette, did you do the Luminous? Oh, Jeanette, we had to do that today.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it as soon as I get back. I'll do it real quick. It's just half an hour.
Okay. Do it, because we need it today. We need it today. Okay, we're sewing today, guys. So anyway, we're going to have those up to Jeanette's thing, and we'll put a link. But anyway, so here, I'll be putting the link later, because we're going to be, oh yeah, I got to put those up. Jeanette have to do the car, and I have to run and get that thing. So anyway, I'll be there a little later. But anyway, so here
That's fine. That'll give me time to do the thing.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so here she's talking about that, and then praising. So here Mary is happy because she's had a baby, but she gets told about her heart will be pierced. Same thing happens here. She's describing how she was happy in the joy and saying, be it done unto me. And then with the presentation, now goest thou to a painful, bitter way. So even though Mary knows it's going to be painful. So then Jesus leaves her. But we got a lot. The whole interview was inexpressibly touching and wonderful. We're a little disappointed, but that punch of that silent Mary is tremendous. So Jesus left her, relapsing her into usual silence and exterior apathy. People think, now she's gone back to herself and her simpleton, but she's not. Jeanette brought up a very good point. She said she's analyzing. My mother was always analyzing. She was one of those people. Silent people are always analyzing. The exact word Jeanette uses. So what happens? She relapses into her usual silence and exterior apathy. Apathetic people are sort of hopeless. They talk about that in their people in a low energy field. We think, just like the Black community, everyone looks down on the poor. But guess what? What does the Bible say? They're the blessed. They will receive the kingdom, right? What appears apathetic to us in the poor makes that suffering, that apathy, that suffering. The Black community, if you notice, they're very religious because they've suffered. They've walked with God. They might be poor and have no education, but as my mother always said, the dumbest old person is smarter than the youngest sharp person. And if you notice, you will meet a lot of, I talk to, like, I'll be in a store or whatever in a certain neighborhood. Maybe I'm going, wherever I am or whatever, and I happen to go in, and sometimes I'll end up chit-chatting with, because me, I'm like you, Jeanette, we talk to everybody. And I will talk to a little old person. And when I was a nurse, this is why I loved nursing, working in the old people. I could work with the Jews that were real rich on the beach, the condos, and I loved it because it was air conditioned. It was beautiful. But I preferred working with the old, the poor Black, and in the building where they're old, because I would get to talk to the old ladies and the little Baptist ladies. They were Sunday school teachers, a lot of them, and they would tell me, and I would say, what was it like not to have a bathroom in the house? They'd say, my ass was cold, and they'd say funny things, but they would give you such insight you could feel their wisdom, but they would be funny like that. I would say, what was it like to have an outhouse? Because these are women that grew up in the South with the outhouses, and they'd say something funny like, my ass was cold. That's what it was like. We look back and we're like so fascinated, but they tell you the reality of it. They were wise old women. So anyway, don't always look down at apathetic people. There are many of them are like the Silent Mary. So be careful when you judge. Don't judge a book by the cover or by the riches. So she returns to the house and everyone thinks she's the simpleton. So Jesus goes back to Lazarus and Martha. She said something like the following: she is not without understanding. So he said to them, she's not a simpleton, guys. Don't be judging her. Just like Jeanette said, don't be judging her. She's not of this world. So what does happen to Martha and Lazarus? Do they then just believe that? No, they still think she's a simpleton. But he's trying to tell them, but she sees this world and this world comprehends her not. They still can't quite see it. They still think she's a simpleton because Martha says to her, Jesus, why isn't she getting up and doing and helping? We hear that in the Bible. So even though Jesus is telling them there, no, she is happy. She knows no sin. She's insulated from the world. My mother was a little like that. Although my mother was a sinner, I know some of her sins she was honest with me about. But this woman, no. She has no sins like that. So Silent Mary in her state of contemplation. What did we learn about today, this week in our formation letter? Expiation and contemplation. Remember the four? Prayer, contemplation, expiation, and what was it? The four? I sent you the fourth thing.
I don't remember them off my head.
Okay, well, they're important. So let me just take a quick look. Okay, here they are. Adoration, adoring God. Contemplation, this is what we're learning in our formation letters of, we're doing Opus Angelorum. And you do 12 letters over the book for your guardian angel. You consecrate yourself. Adoration, contemplation, expiation, and mission. So here, her mission is prayer and stuff like that. So before all others, she kept silence, not from pride or reserve. No, it was because she saw not those people interior, saw not what they saw, but gazed upon redemption and the things of heaven alone. So she wasn't like my mom who was analyzing people. She knew things, and she's a little different is what it's saying. She's more mystical, like Jeanette was talking about. So at times, accosted by learned and pious friend of the family, they were surrounded by pious people. She would utter words audibly, and people would be like, what is she saying? Is she talking to herself? This is why they thought she was a simpleton and delusional, because once in a while she would be hearing the heaven things and she would be sort of pondering these heavenly things. So though without understanding a single word of what had been said to her. So she was know things intuitively, not having reference or connection with the vision upon which she was interiorly gazing. She heard without hearing. Consequently, so she intuitively knew these things. That's what they're telling us here. She was engrossed in her own attention and mystified her hearers. For this reason, she was regarded by the family as a simpleton. They're like, she's just saying random words. They're like, what the heck is she talking about? Her state necessitated her dwelling alone. My mother dwelt alone, and I do too. I cannot be with a lot of people. I get bombarded with I can't. Jeanette, you like to be around people? I can't. I get too bombarded with them. Anyway, for her soul lived not in time. She was like over on the other side already. I can't wait to get to the other side. She cultivated her little garden and embroidered. Martha brought her work. She was skillful with the needle. So like Jeanette is always there embroidering, and Jeanette, I think that's why Jeanette has to keep her hands busy, because then her mind can kind of work. She doesn't realize this, but she's thinking when she's doing this. She has to have her hands busy, but I think it helps her mind think that she doesn't realize these things, because that's what they're talking about here. Uninterrupted musing. and meditation. Jeanette doesn't realize, like, when we do the rosary, we're meditating. When you do your needling, because Jeanette does a lot with her hands. When we're talking, she's making rosaries. She's a kind of person, like my daughter's like that. She has to get up and move. Jeanette has to be moving. A lot of ADD people are like that. My daughter in church, she couldn't sit still. She would jump up and down when she was a little girl.
Yeah.
My mom used to get so irritated. So I would bring like books or whatever just to keep her busy, but she'd be up and down, and my mom gets so irritated with her. Sometimes we couldn't even go to church with my mom. Elizabeth, ADD people are like that. They have to be like, I'm ADD, not ADHD. Jeanette is ADHD. She's got to be moving. Elizabeth is ADHD. She has to be moving. I'm ADD without the H. I wish I was. Maybe my house would be cleaner. Anyway.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
No, but you're always doing. You just have
Yeah, but my house is not
too many
clean.
projects. You have too many projects, and you don't hone your thinking, because you could do that with your work, but you don't. You want to do 100 things. Anyway, so she prayed piously and devoutly, which we are working on with our silence. That's why the Mindful Catholic guys, you got to listen to it. Her dwelling was comfortably fitted with sofas, but she was always alone. She died of grief at the immensity of Jesus's passion. She saw he was going to be beaten, and it destroyed her, because she knew he was going to be in horrible pain. She spoke of Jesus of Martha spoke to Jesus of Magdalene and her own great anxiety on her account. Mary Magdalene, remember, she's possessed by 7 demons or whatever, and Martha is worried about her, and Jesus is comforting her, saying, don't worry, Magdalene will be converted. Don't worry, I got it. I'm handling it. A lot of times we are so worried about others, we're trying to tell them what to do. We got to just realize Jesus has got this. We can't be worried about, oh, Protestants aren't doing everything right. You shouldn't say this right, and you shouldn't do that. We got to not concern ourselves with what others are doing. Jesus has got this, and that's what he's telling her here. I got this. She must on no account weary of praying for her, though. This is what he says that's important when he talks to Martha. We don't just hear Martha and Mary, or Mary and Mary in this. We hear Martha, but it's little. She's worried about someone else. As usual, Martha's got her nose, like me. We got our nose in everyone else's business. My mom, I'm a Martha, my mom's a Mary. I got my nose in trying to tell Jeanette what to do. Jeanette, no, you got to do this. I'm a Martha, you see. That's what he's telling her. Don't worry, I got this. So he's telling me, I got Jeanette. Don't you worry, Henrietta. I got Jeanette. And that's what he's telling us. We need to take a message. But he says, but don't be weary of praying for her. Don't stop praying. Sometimes I feel like my prayers, especially for my kids, I'm praying for certain things and they won't do it. I'm like, I've been praying for you for this. Why are you doing this? And I get mad at them. And they're like, Mom, back off, Mom. They should be saying Martha. They don't know this story yet, though. Hopefully someday they'll read this. They'll be like, yeah, we knew that. But he's telling her, don't stop praying for her and exhorting her to change her life. So guys, we can't judge people. We have to pray for them. Don't judge the priests right now. Everybody's always judging saying it's not our business. Jesus is telling us this. So then what do we hear? Here comes Mary. This is the one I was excited. This is the last 2 pages. It's Mary comes in. I was disappointed. I wanted more from Mary. So he's talking about all the people that come with her that have been received, and then about them eating and washing their guests' feet, because that's what they did back then, and talks about their dress and their fresh veils and their undyed wool, because they weren't worried about being with beautiful blue and purple. They weren't worried about that. They're wearing yellowish and brownish. They were more humble. They didn't, my daughter always, I wanted this. I wanted my nails done. I wanted this piercing. I'm like, why are these people with these tattoos and piercing and this vanity? It's showing here how humble these people are. Well, our young people today, what are they worried about?
I don't mind tattoos. I just don't like when they start putting them on their face. Why?
And the
Why is
piercing,
it going? Why is it going from the necks to the faces. Why?
Well, I prayed
not
my daughter
right.
would never do tattoos and all. My kids don't do tattoos, thank God. But the piercing, she has 20 stinging holes in one ear. Like, why do you need and get infected because they shouldn't be pierced? So I get a little irritated with that. But what are they like in here? Our young people today, we are so full of ourselves in our society. You know, we want everything. I like my glasses because they're stylish. They don't care. They're in their brownish white and their yellowish wool. They don't care. They're humble. We have to get moving here. They partook the light refreshment. We have two more pages. So we get to, we're finally at Mary. And he accompanies Martha to her house. So we're done with Martha. He says, don't stop praying for her and don't judge, pray for Mary. She's got her sister wrong and she's got Mary Magdalene wrong. He's telling her, stop involving yourself. Okay. Same as he's telling me, stop involving yourself and just pray for them. Jesus and men now presented themselves to salute the holy women. So here we got Mary, and he's telling Mary, what's he telling her? Mom, I'm kind of leaving you behind now. This is my career. I'm going my way to John's baptism. We get to hear a conversation, but we're hearing what Jesus said to her. We're not so much hearing about Mary, and this is where I wanted to bring and look for Samaria, but we don't have time. But later today, I'm going to come from Jeanette's house. I will try to tape something and I'm going to bring this to show Mary. So I'm going to look for Samaria there. So if you want to see I'll do a live from Jeanette's when we sew. I like to show you guys from the region of Samaria. But then he would retire to the desert for 40 days. He's like, Mom, I'm going away. He's telling Mary this. And Mary heard him speak of the desert. She became very uneasy. She knows the devil. She doesn't know, but we know what happens in the desert, the 40 days. The Jesus is, he's trying to tempt him. Of course he doesn't. He says, well, you're hungry for 40 days. This is where we get about Lent. Remember, guys, this is about Lent. And he says, she's like scared because she knows he's going to be facing Satan. So she gets uneasy. We may not hear her words, but we feel her feelings. She's worried about her child. Remember, it's still her son. And she's worried. He's going into the desert and he's going to be facing the devil. So she besought him not to go to the frightful place where he would die of hunger and thirst. That's the other thing. There's no 7-Elevens out there on the corners. He can't just go get a drink. He will be in the desert, and she's worried about him living and dying. And Jesus is like, she should not deter him. This is by human considerations. He, just like we have to fast and stuff like Lent, and we're supposed to fast during those 40 days and only have like 2 small meal or 1 meal and 2 small. We're lucky we get that. He doesn't get that. But he's saying, don't try to deter me, just like he told Peter, get behind me, Satan. He's sort of telling his mother the same thing. He's saying, yes, I know you're worried, Mom, but I have to do this. This is my mission. Expiation. What do we do? Adoration, contemplation, expiation, repenting of our sins, and mission. He's talking about that. So he must accomplish what he was marked out for him, he tells her. A very different life was now about to commence for him. He's saying, Mom, things are about to change. We are not hearing what she's saying, but we are hearing something huge. He's telling her things are about to change. And then he said, whoever will hear to him must suffer with him. Mary already knew about the sword. But he must now fulfill his mission, and she must sacrifice all purely personal claims upon him. He's like, Mom, back off. My kids will always tell me, I'm like, I see them going toward a hole, and I'm like, guys, please don't do it. Please, don't. But what do our crosses do? Our crosses, they, what do we say about people? They sanctify us. So when we're worried about someone, Jesus doesn't have to be sanctified, but he's telling her she must sacrifice all purely personal claims upon him, which is what we do during Lent, right? We do that during Lent. And We have to do that and recognize when we see our kids doing something and we're watching them and we're like, oh no, you're going to do something bad. You're going to do something bad. And we're worried about them sinning. I'm not saying don't warn our kids, because you should, because they need that help along the way. Jesus didn't need that. He's saying, don't worry. He added, this is what he added when they say Mary, just that he treated her just as woman, because they don't understand the word, the vernaculars and the way their language back then. Jeanette knows that. She'll tell you about that. He added that although he would love her as ever, he now was for all mankind. He told her she is his mother. She has a place of honor, no matter what Protestants say. Mary has a place of honor. And Jeanette will tell you about what woman meant. But she should do as he said, and his heavenly Father would reward her. What does she get in the end? She gets assumed into heaven because she doesn't sin, and she gets that crown. She is above the angels. She is the only human that is like the queen of the angels too. She's the queen of heaven, but she's also the queen of the angels, which are above her in nature. So for what Simeon had foretold was about to be fulfilled. Remember, he was just told by Silent Mary that they just talked. He wasn't just told this, he would know this being God, but he just discussed this, a sword would pierce her soul. So he's telling Mary, remember when Simeon told you that? Now is the time for it to be fulfilled. So I always wondered if Mary knew this stuff. She knew. What does Mary do? She listens gravely. She gets very sad, and she's very much troubled, just like she was when Simeon, she was all excited about having a baby, and Simeon tells her, but your sword, your soul, your heart, a sword will pierce. And she's like, what? I'm happy in the happiest time of my life. She's being told now is the time of fulfillment. But at the same time, she was still strong in her resignation. She was sad, but she didn't. And for Jesus was very tender and loving. He's telling her this, Mom, now is the time of fulfillment. She's scared. She's like, please don't go, Jesus. Don't go, because you won't have food and water. He's saying, Mom, it's okay. Now is the time I fulfill. Remember what Simeon told you? This is the time of fulfillment for you, just like for me. And my followers will suffer. He sweetly, lovingly, could you imagine we don't get to hear all these words, but we hear the gist, and we hear how tender, we hear the mood, we can infer the words, and we can see how Mary responds. She's scared, and now she's sad. So I was disappointed we didn't get more about Mary, but really we got a lot. Really, we did.
Oh,
yeah. So then that evening, so now we're done with Mary, which is what I was said. I wanted more. What it is, Jeanette, is we want more. It's not that we're disappointed in what we heard. We just want more of it. We want more.
Yeah.
So then he's done with her. So Lazarus gives a feast. Simon, the Pharisees and others in the sect were invited. Women ate separately, but they got to hear. And Jeanette, we always hear that, the women knew what was going on, but they heard through sort of a partition. They get to hear, but they're not allowed to sit with the men. It was about, they had to respect their men or whatever. And that's when he tells them, everyone who follow them must not look back. This is what I try to tell my daughter. She's very sad, even though she left her boyfriend. She's sad about, the relationship. She knows it was not right. And I told her, yes, it's good that you're grieving now, but now you got to move on, and you can't look back, because when you look back, you get sad and you think of what you lost, but you have to look at what you're gaining. And they should practice what he taught and suffer the trials that might befall them. He's trying to prepare them. Don't look to behind, but yet remember what I taught you, and that's the thing. Remember the lessons, but don't get back into the emotions. Use the head, not the heart, in this particular sense. Remember the lessons to the heart, but don't, go back. He would never abandon them. And then he talks again. He warns them. This is a thorny path before him to the buffetings and persecutions. They still don't get it, though. We know that they don't get it. They still don't get it. But he's trying to give them, in every story, remember, we're human, and that's how we learn stories. He's trying to give them a foreshadowing. And he's also giving us that because he knows the Bible's going to be written someday. He knows we have to be taught in these stories. So he's saying, listen to the, if you ever watch a story, some people will be like, I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen, because they're reading the what do they call it? The foreknowledge or whatever. He's telling them he would have to undergo, impressed upon them, the fact. This is why I think Joseph couldn't be here. Jeanette and I talk about Joseph. He couldn't know these things, and his friends would have to suffer with them. The hearers, deeply touched, listened in wonder, but they still didn't get it. He said in their illusions, their bitter passion, they did not rightly understand. They did not take his words in their simple literal meaning, but looked upon them as figurative. The expressions of the prophecy, the Protestants don't understand when he said, this is my body, he meant it. They don't understand. The Pharisees present were even less favorably disposed than the others, found no carp in Jesus. They even understood it lessly. This time, however, he spoke very moderately. He was careful because otherwise he'd be persecuted before he was fully done. So guys, this is the end of our reading, but I wanted Jeanette to say some things, but she has to get her car to the thing. Please come back. Jesus's journey with Lazarus to the place of baptism. Jeanette, do you have a final word? You have to leave now, right? I wanted Jeanette to talk about, I'll get her to talk about it when we start, about why Jesus uses the word woman. So you'll hear that in the next thing. She's going to talk about that. I'm going to ask her to do that before we start our reading for next time. So guys, that's everything. Jeanette has to get ready because she has to leave her. Oh, here she is. She's back. Do you have a minute?
Minute.
Okay. What about the woman? Why does Jesus use, because you just did that in a Bible study and you explained it to us. Remember how he says woman?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he uses the term woman because that is at the beginning in Genesis, that's how God recalled Eve as woman, and also because he's like bringing
the new Eve.
He's trying to bring Mary back to, he's not just her son, he's also the Son of God.
And that's what he was telling her just now.
That's his place. He's showing her that, I'm also the Son of God. It's hard to explain.
But you're explaining it perfectly.
Yeah, I have a better definition of it in the book, but
he was now for all mankind. Although he would love her, just because he called her woman did not mean he disrespected her.
No.
Like Protestants say, this is what he told her here. I will forever love you, but now I have to give of myself. I'm on the mission. Adoration, contemplation. I'm going to post this. It won't show here.
That is when he was, he started what he was born for. He says it several times in the Bible that he was born for this. He was born to be the salvation of us and start this.
Right.
He was starting this, but sometimes it was
his
hard
mission.
for
His mission.
people to see it because he was the son of Joseph, a carpenter. You know what? The son of Joseph, a carpenter, is the Son of God. It was hard for people to understand it.
And then he's warning the people of that. Yeah. And Jeanette, what does he do? What is why were we saying Joseph could not be there? Because he would have protected him, because he was the protector.
Yes, Joseph would have died violently because he would have protected Jesus, trying to get him not to get taken, trying to, all the suffering that he would not be able to protect
He was his
them
protector.
from.
Yeah.
Yes, because he was the rock of the family.
So he
And
had to die
also-
before.
Also, we needed to have the bonding of Jesus and Mary. You know, we needed that how Mary and Jesus
And
went
he had to give
on.
her John. He had to give her John because
Yes,
Joseph was older.
It was all in the plan. It was all in the
Yeah.
plan.
Let me say one more thing and then we're going to go. The 4 fundamental directions of Opus Angelorum are adoration, contemplation, expiation, and mission. And that's everything we just talked about today, guys. It's just fascinating, these layers.
Yes,
Love
very
you.
good. Very good reading.
Jeanette, let me know when you're done.
Yes.
And I'll be up
Yes.
there and we will see you guys. Come back because we're ready to go to the
Okay.
baptism.
Bye, guys. Have a blessed